Hi there. There's Penny. For those of you who are always curious as to where she is, she more or less decided to come out and show herself today, sort of, kind of. Anyway, to continue looking at things on habits today, I want to talk about measurements. And again, for those of you who are interested, maybe you're not, but I'm still taking it out of this little book. Again, little book. It's not that big. I mean, you might be surprised I'm taking this many times to get it out of this little book, but there's a lot of information in there. Anyway, taking a look at measurement, and some of you are going to say, but why should I measure anything? Measurement gives you some data. Now, some of you think that that's a four-letter word and you really don't want to have anything to do with it, but it can be really, really interesting and really helpful and sometimes maybe even surprising. So that you're looking at how often and when and where you do whatever it is that you want to change, or how often you don't do, as the case may be. So, for example, if you say, I want to stop yelling at my kids, so can you, for a couple of weeks, take account of when you actually yell at them? What's going on? Is it so what you're looking at later is it specific time of day? Do you usually use it, say, at the end of the day? Do you use it in the morning? Um, and this is going to be an interesting time of year for some of you because it's around the time when school starts for a lot of you. And so you might find that some of the information you get of when you yell at your children, for example, using this particular example right at this moment, might be different when they're in school session and when they're not in school. You could see this on minor details when the school is in session, let's say, October or something like that, because you might be doing different behavior during the week when school's in session versus on the weekend when it's not, and the children are generally at home, generally more or less. So that you're looking at those particular pieces of information because you might find that it's maybe when the children are home that you don't yell at them. Maybe it's because when they are in school, because maybe the schedule is different for you on that particular day, or maybe the position's reversed. Okay? So that when you find out exactly when you do whatever it is that you want to change, it makes it easier actually to know what you're trying to do. Let's take eating. If you not want to overeat, but if you find that you overeat, and you might say, well, I just eat too much because I'm watching television and I'm binge watching Netflix or something. But if you start paying attention to when you overeat or when you snack, let's say you keep track of when you just grab something out of a bag and toss it in your mouth, you might recognize the fact that maybe you're spending more time during the day getting little bits of something, whatever that may be, as opposed to when you sit down and watch television. Maybe it's a combination of the two, but you may not think of all those little times during the day in which you snack because it's just a little thing. Oh, it's just a potato chip here and a potato chip there. Potato chips add up, you know, and that's where the measurement comes in because these are going to be certain things that once you begin to account for them, you'll be surprised at how often they happen, more often than not. And that's maybe where it gets to be surprising because I'd be willing to bet that some of your habits occur when you're not really aware that you're doing it, so to speak. I mean, you know what you're doing, but when you stop to think about what you're doing during the course of the day, you don't think about these things. Somebody who wants to stop smoking, I would be willing to bet that there are times that you pick up a cigarette and you smoke. But if I said, when do you smoke? You'll give me five other things, but you'll never think about those particular times. Does this make sense? So the idea of once you start taking measurements, and all you may need for this is just a piece of paper and something to write down and just little tick marks and maybe some kind of a checklist or whatever, and some notes so that you could say, okay, I do this and when do I do it? I smoke when the telephone rings and I end up knowing that I'm going to have to talk to somebody I don't want to talk to. This might be something that you don't think about when you have to start thinking about wanting to stop smoking. And it could be a downfall because if you get a lot of telephone calls, then you may have a lot of times you smoke, which then leads into something else later, which makes you pick up a cigarette. And so the whole thing begins to be a problem because you're not starting with that telephone call that makes you smoke in the first place. Some of you could actually have something similar with eating. You get a telephone call from somebody you don't want to talk to, or something you have to deal with on the phone for whatever that is, and maybe you grab something for sustenance rather, And so you start eating or something like that because, or maybe because you just have nothing to do while you're sitting on the phone listening to somebody else. So there may be little things during the course of your day and your week at which points you do something that you're not paying really any attention to because they're just small, insignificant, what you think is insignificant moments during the course of the week. And once you start paying attention to these things and just label it initially as when do I smoke or when do I eat other than regular meals or when do I yell at my kids or when do I walk if you're trying to catch how many times you walk or, if you're trying to get, say, like 6,000, 10,000 steps, whatever that may be. So if you're looking at some particular behavior that you want to change or increase or decrease, when do you do it? So if you're trying to get, say, 10,000 steps, or if you're thinking, oh, I get up and walk a lot during the course of the day, when do you actually get up and walk? Do you pay attention and keep track of that? Now, I'm not necessarily saying in this case that you have to keep track of every single step you take unless you have an app that does that for you. But until you start taking numbers and take a look at what you're actually doing, it becomes really difficult to change anything because you're trying to change something and then you're being, in a sense, sabotaged because something else creeps in that you're not even aware of because you don't think about it because it happens just so automatically. Does this make sense? I hope it does. Um, and just pick a behavior, any behavior, even if you don't want to change it, and just start looking at this. Or you can also do this essentially if you're trying to deal with somebody else, maybe a teenager, perhaps could be, who basically says, I don't do this. And you say, okay, let's keep track of it and start keeping track of whenever the child, teen, whatever, does whatever you're saying it is, and the kid says, no, I don't do it. Now, you may end up getting into some kind of quote disagreement over this, but if you think in terms of what I'm talking about, if you say, oh, you do this all the time, until you can define what all the time is, it becomes really difficult to do anything about changing that behavior. So the next couple of weeks, or maybe depending, again, going back to the fact that school's going on or about to go on, or summer vacations ending or whatever, depending on where you're living, you may want to give some thought to how you want to look at this. Do you want to wait until school starts to see what you do during school? Do you want to do it now when school's not in session, assuming, of course, school's not in session for you? Or maybe you want to do it both times just to compare the two data. But when you have the data, then you have something that you can say, oh, this is what happens when, or this is what I do. And then you can figure out what you want to do from there. Does that make sense? I hope so. Because let's see, a couple of other questions. It's how often do I do this? How often do I eat? Um, how many hours a day do I spend watching television? If you actually keep track of the time you spend television, how many hours a day do I scroll media? So if you think you're going to go online and, oh, I just take a look at this and I don't scroll very long, start marking down the times that you scroll and when you stop. I'd be willing to bet that you scroll a lot more than you think you do. I know I do. Um, so what bothers me? How often do I feel guilty? Um, how often do I drink? How often do I drink sugary drinks? You can take any particular behavior that you're looking at, and depending on what aspect you're wanting to change, you can keep track of just about anything. As long as you make notes about when it happens, you might have to take into consideration how you're feeling. So maybe you eat or drink a lot of sugary stuff because you need the energy because you didn't sleep the night before, or you were in an argument with somebody or whatever. This gives you some more information and helps you make a better choice to make a better decision to stop or start the behavior that you want to change. Does this make sense? I hope so. So let me know how this goes. Keep track of it for a while. And I know this may be, as I said, it's easy to do. It's difficult to stay with it, but it can give you a lot of information. And again, it might be surprising the information you find when you actually look at this. Okay. So I hope this was helpful and we'll chat with you later. So have a good week. And can I say have fun looking at your data? Chat later. Bye. Did this not